I'm Irizona Duckworth, reared in Chicago, and during the war, my husband decided that we weren't to be staying in the city, and he was without a job. He was making transfer of a job. Meanwhile, while he was out, I wrecked the car and didn't realize that I was carrying a little gift to the post office for a child to send off to, and my mother-in-law and my baby were in the car, and I was driving carefully when there was a speed. When I got to the corner of the block, there's a speeding car came, and I stopped right quick, and so as not for him to hit me. And when he went to stop, he turned his car over. He hit my car, and of course turned his car over half a block down. He was going so fast, and we were saved. And so when my husband got the message that I had the wreck, he said, "Oh Lord, no job, no car, no nothing." And I was scared to death. So I said, "And I don't even have my license with me." And the police said, "Well, you'll be taken down. We have to take you down." And so I had to go to the jail, not to the office or wherever it was. That was just a part of my problem. And my husband, but to hear him saying no job, no nothing, and here I was so safe, happy and praising the Lord because of my mother-in-law and my baby and I weren't hurt. And so I just lost it myself. But to make a long story short, when he took the car back, to the mechanic shook his head and said, "I'm sorry." He said, "I can't do anything about it." And I thought, praise the Lord, we're saved without that. And my husband's grieving. And so he has friends who had just moved from Chicago to Michigan and gotten a job in Indiana at the automobile place there. And so he said he'll run up and see about getting a job with them. Even though they were in Michigan, this automobile place was in Benton Harbor, Indiana. So I said, well, if he goes, I'll have to go with him. My mother said, "You let that boy go and find himself and then come back." And so I said, "No, I'll take the baby with me." And so, because where I lay, I can lay by his side, and the baby can lay in his buggy. And so that's the way we came up to, the Lord led us out of the city into the country, which I knew nothing about. Scared to death of it. At night, there's no lights, and you could go any place, there's no post to tell you what corner you're on or anything. So I had to learn all about being out in the country, even though I had visited my grandparents who lived in the country, but I had no responsibility, just the joy of being there. And so that is the way we got to the country, and God allowed us to leave when we were thinking about our parents being in the city. Oh, we needed a place to stay. And while my friend's husband was at work, she'd drive me around to find a place. And this place that we found, the man wanted to sell it, and he didn't want to rent it out, he wanted to sell it. And it had about 70-something acres of ground on it. But anyway, my mother had been praying to leave the city for years, but she came up to Michigan and she found out she didn't ever think she wanted to come to Michigan of all places. So anyway, when we called her that evening and she wasn't home, she was downtown at some kind of musical doings, she said, my husband said, well, let's get in the car right now and go and pick them up, because we could rent from them, since Mother had been talking about she wanted to live in the country. But she and my father discussed it. One would want to go and the other one didn't want to come and whatnot. And so my sister, Catherine Bland, who was yet at home, came with my parents in our car. So Daddy had to get back to work early the next morning, and we didn't get there until midnight, and they stayed up in the living room while we went to bed. So we could be, because the man that was selling the place was right across the street, so we can go to the courthouse with him. And so they surprised the man because he felt there's no problem, because these green people from the city doesn't know anything about the country. And anyway, Mother them didn't have nothing like the money that he wanted down on. But he just thought, well, they're going to lose everything anyway. So he took so it's when the court opened up in town, we were there right away to close it up, the deal. And so as the gentleman, my parents came out the front of the courthouse, and the other people went out the back where they knew how to go. And for my dad to get on the bus to get back home. And so the owner told us, says, they didn't even pick up the soil off the ground. Those green people don't know anything about buying the country. They were going to lose the place. But he met this gentleman on his way out that said he had the money for him. He said, you see those people? They just left. Just tied up the deal. But don't worry. So that was the beginning of our coming to the country, following God's plan, how the Lord will lead. And my mother always taught us to never be in debt, for owe no man anything, let God do the leading. And so her little statement would always be, call for what you want and pay for what you get, and let God do the rest. I got this message from the office in Benton Harbor to come and interview. I thought they meant me to come to work. I didn't take it as an interview. And so, but they always had to interview at least 3 people before. But I applied, I responded to that letter. And I hadn't heard anybody. And I called to see. They said, well, I called as if they had neglected my doings. And to make a long story short, I was accepted there and that was another story of ice breaking, because they didn't intend to have that situation. And the girls would sit up in the office and they'd talk about their shows and whatnot. I'm working hard. I was a dictaphone operator, recording the workers' work, and I'd work real hard, because as soon as my stack got down, they'd pile it up again. The girls, 3 of the girls in the office there, they're talking about their shows or whatever business they were doing. And I didn't get my first day's work, I couldn't get paid for it because I left too soon to come pick up my children. I dropped them off. I drove about 100 and some miles a day because from on the other side of Cassopolis up to Berrien Springs to drop the children off to go to school, and then drive on over to Benton Harbor and do whatever I had to do after work, or shopping or whatever, and then come back and pick up my children and take them home. And meanwhile, my husband was out of a job because Studebaker wasn't working at that time. And I do that every day through sleet and snow and whatnot. And I remember one time I was picking, we came, it was so deep in the snow, it was so dangerous. Anyway, we got here to the campus. When we got to the campus, the children tried to get me out of the being stuck and broke the tire, hit the tire or something. So I said, well, you all run on to school, because they were on the campus ground. When they got to school, there was no school. They had closed, they didn't open that morning. So we had driven. But anyway, I had to, the car had to be left. Well, that's what's different. I'm mixing up that story because that was one day. But anyway, the other time I was driving, dropping the children off and driving them, worked until 5 o'clock, let them get their studies done, drive back home, and then, which is in Cassopolis. I think it's over 100 miles a day. More than 100 because it's, well, it's quite a distance. So I did that for their first year. And meanwhile, I'm suffering from this transition of knowing how to relate to people who don't seem like they feel like they were human as far as I was concerned. So one of the girls, Marie, I shall never forget her name, from St. Joe, I happened to be at the desk when she came in to register, and the welcome desk that was off of my office duty from my regular duty. And she became a very good friend of mine. And she saw what, girl, how are you putting up with all this? I wouldn't do this. I said, Marie, I said, be quiet. I said, I have gotten my certification for that period, or whatever they call it, I don't remember, for that period. And so I said, you haven't been, so that's okay. But every now and then she'd come by my office and see things. And she was from St. Joe. And so anyway, she encouraged me to write to the state. Well, when I wrote to the state, but I know I quit. And I lost my Christmas doings and different things, my financial, I just quit. And so when I did go, the state asked me to come back. Later on, I don't remember the time, distance. So when, because I'd be monitored. Well, I went back. And of course, if something went wrong with my machine, I would be given the words, this, that, and the other. I would be, and I couldn't take, the girls would take time off to go get their hair done, or go do this, go that. I'd be docked with them. I couldn't dare do that. I only asked for the Sabbath, those hours off. Well, I had to lose my time for that time to be on Fridays, and I'd have to leave early. I never took my time off, except for the first day when I was there, and the children were left at school. Matriculated. I got there late. And of course, that day I wasn't given any consideration at all. And when the sun went down, I wouldn't be given consideration on that at all. When I worked at the Berrien County Bureau of Social Aid, I think I was the very first of color to work there beside a social worker. I was a dictaphone operator. And of course, that records the reports of your social workers. Is that better? And so I would be just typing away, and as fast as my load would get down, they'd put some others on me. And so even the leader, what's his title, of the social worker, this time, can't think of the title of this. He would say, Miss Duckworth, you're supposed to take time to get out for a break. You're supposed to take a break. I said, well, I can't because as long as I pile that on. So I would try to keep up with what my work was being piled upon me, because as soon as I get it down, it'd be piled up again. And I never could finish. And so at one time, I don't know if it was before I quit or after I came back, one of the supervisors says, Ms. Duckworth, says, I understand you're a teacher. I wanted to tell her, but I'm not acceptable because of the color of my skin. You know, there was no place. They asked for it, but when I showed up, it's a different thing. And so, anyway, she put it in my head to, well, I had applied for teaching, and the very place that I applied for teaching later on hired me after this situation. I worked there for several years. And so that's the reason I wanted to keep my record clean and clear. And I wanted my children in church school because the income there was sparsely, you know. And I did all I could to work where I could, when I could, and at the advantage of my children being with me, not having them to be cared for other people. And so I just figured, well, this is Christmas, and I didn't think about, man, I lost my Christmas doings and this and that and the other. All I did was just quit a little bit before Christmas, and then in about, I think it was about January or February, the state wrote and asked me to go back. And that's when I went back, and I got a different kind of reaction from this situation. If my typewriter broke down or I needed this, all my feelings was inferior. But in the meanwhile, the state was checking up and interviewing the people that they had come. So while they were interviewing, they called me in afterwards and interviewed me. And Marie, I shall never forget the girl that I registered at the table, at the desk, said, girl, you made me so mad. She says, don't you know that there would have to be an elimination? I said, oh, I don't want anybody else to be hurt by something to that effect, because I wasn't after, undermining anybody else. But it was so obvious until after they left, she really got after me about being so humble about the situation, not telling it like it exactly as